Hello and happy International Day of the Girl 2023. My name is Cindy Serrano Roberts. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Freedom Group, whose mission is to empower women and girls around the world to lead extraordinarily. I am thrilled to be able to host this discussion today that really kind of talks about and shines the light on International Day of the Girl and why it's important and why men, women, boys, and girls should really key into the discussions today and what it means to them. So, to give you a little bit of background on what International Day of the Girl is, on December 19th, 2011, the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 66-170. And that resolution declared that October 11th was the International Day of the Girl Child to recognize girls' rights and the unique challenges that girls face around the world. So, as we pull the thread on this year's theme, which is empowering girls' rights, their well being, and their leadership, please sit with us, share this space, and let's talk about what it looks like across government, across academia, community, and other places that we live in every day. So, without any further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Miss Latoya Wright, our moderator for this year's event. Latoya, over to you.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and welcome to our fall fellowship cohort who was also in attendance. But first, before we get into these questions, please give me a few moments to introduce our panelists. We have Miss Casey Page, who is a high school student and community leader, who is a student athlete on the AP Honor Roll, mind you, and has served as an intern at the U.S. House of Representatives. She currently serves as a fellow at the Pineapple Labs, where she assists senior software developers in how to strategically tailor social networking sites for Gen Z. Also, we have Ms. Sanskriti Deva, who currently serves as the youngest elected UN Association rep, is an inventor, holds an honors distinction in computer engineering at North Carolina State, previously served as the quantum software engineer and design research intern at IBM, and is passionate about quantum research and STEM. So, ladies, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to talk to us about things important concerning International Day of the Girl. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you guys for having me. This is very important, and these are important conversations to have.
I'm good as well, and thank you so much again. This is really a great opportunity to highlight digital literacy and equity and inclusion.
Yes. And let's just get started because we have a lot to talk about. So first, before we dive into how each of you champion equitable access to opportunities for women and girls in your respective areas of interest, can you tell me in your own words what the International Day of the Girl means to you and why it's important that the world observes it each year? We'll go with you, Ms. Page. What do you think about that?
Sure. Internationally, the girl is important to me personally as being on the younger side. It highlights change makers like myself internationally. And then without having this opportunity and without having this day of observance, I think that the drive for continued access and continued opportunities to grow in STEM and opportunities to grow as a person would not be as easily available, and it wouldn't be as successful.
Okay, Ms. Dava, what do you say about that as well?
For sure. As a woman in STEM growing up, there weren't a lot of role models that I could look up to that I knew about that I could say, oh, they did that, so I can do this as well. Because growing up in school, we were only really taught about Caucasian males in STEM throughout history. And so to me, International Day of the Girl means to take up space, because I've realized that when I've seen a woman take up space in my classes, and for context, my classes have mostly men right now in college. The ratio is almost 9-1 men to women. But when I see a woman do something like raise her hand in class, I feel seen. I feel like, oh, she's raising her hand in class just to ask a question. And that's such a simple thing. But now I can do that too. And so to me, it means taking up space unapologetically.
I like that. And the way that both of you have captured what it means to have this day represented. You summed it up perfectly. Taking up space in a good way, right? Because where there's no women, that means that there's no diversity. Where there's no girls, that means that there's a lack of diversity. So I love that. So when you think about, and Ms. David, this goes to you. When you think about what it means to invest in the rights of girls and the need for more equitable access in STEM spaces, what does that look like? And, to a high school student who wants to learn how to code, it doesn't know where to start, or to see someone like you who's paving the way in the field of quantum computation, which I need for you to explain what that is, and software development.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I promise quantum computing isn't as hard as it might sound initially. Um, but yeah, I think that for me, that looks like definitely having support systems embedded into STEM careers for women, because a lot of women go into STEM and there's a lot of great work being done at the start of STEM careers, especially with middle school and high schoolers. And then they get to college and then they get to early professionals and realize there aren't a lot of support systems for women. There are not a lot of places you can go where you feel like there's a community. And so a lot of the grassroots work I've been doing since I've gotten to college is kind of creating those support systems through student organizations and off-campus organizations. Then the next thing I think is having resources to be able to pursue your dreams and being able to shoot for the stars, because I think a lot of us women sell ourselves short, especially because I saw this quote about women in STEM that said, it was a professor, and it was something that she had noticed throughout her years of teaching, that women wanted to get it perfect versus men would usually go to office hours, get it wrong, and still be confident within themselves, confident enough to fail. And so I think for me, that looks like creating an environment where women feel confident enough to fail and to fail gracefully as well. And so I think those two things are very important when we're thinking about the International Day of the Girl.
Wow. So Ms. Page, again, considering the environment you're in, over to you. How have you been able to explore these areas of STEM within the school environments you've been a part of?
Sure. I think asking the questions, and I think asking questions is the hardest part of how do you get started in finding somebody that is willing to grow within the opportunities provided for you. Finding organizations such as Girls Who Code, et cetera, and then taking the people that you meet and the companies that you meet and cold emailing and reaching out and saying, hey, I'm interested in this. And then continuing that opportunity is, I think the missing piece is probably scholarship and opportunities. So you have one opportunity, but how do you grow from it and how do you build off of it? So just finding the person and then finding somebody that will help you grow within yourself in STEM and in your space.
So let me ask you this, Ms. Page. So how did you find out about the opportunity to be an intern at Pineapple Labs?
I saw it through LinkedIn. And I think that a lot of young people aren't on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is probably something that I've been able to use as a tool of connection to other people and opportunities, especially getting involved in advocacy.
So then would both of you say that one of the important threads here to pull at is access to the technology where the information is provided?
Definitely.
Okay, so I'll save that question because we might discuss it a little later. So I have another question that I think we might get to. So then let's move on then. So how can we then invest in the rights of girls who are increasingly underrepresented in the spaces? What has been your experience and how that investment played out in your own lives, basically?
So for me, I went to a lower income high school, and it was mostly a minority high school. It was a historically Black high school. And one of the things that I noticed was that even though those opportunities were out there, the hardest part was really finding those opportunities, especially since most people at my high school had 2 part-time jobs while they were in high school. They did not have time to go on LinkedIn to search for them. And also, it felt like while we were at that high school that those opportunities were not for us because we didn't see a lot of representation in those fields. And so I think it's a two-part question that we tried to solve while we were there. And after that, I started a organization called Invent STEM that focuses on STEM accessibility in high schools and middle schools. And it's now changed its name, but what we did was we tried to make sure that the opportunities were very easy to find and almost sort of given to students, and shown that even if you're working two part-time jobs, if you apply for this, it's going to be a fun way to explore STEM. And so that was super important to make sure that they knew that it was a space for them, and that also it was something that was easy to do, not difficult to do, not something that they had to search the depths of LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok for, because most of the minorities that are being underrepresented don't have time to do that, especially if they come from a low income status and are supporting their family. And I think those voices are the ones that need to be represented the most.
Ms. Page, what about you? How have you seen the investment happen? Or if you haven't seen it, what would be some suggestions on what we can do to invest?
Sure. I think it's, again, a two-part. I can answer how I've seen it and then how I'd like to see it used. I went to middle school in a building with over 1,200 students. So the opportunities were there, but they weren't, nobody's offering them to you. Nobody goes, oh, hey, we have an opportunity in STEM, or hey, we have an opportunity for girls in STEM. And I think that kind of tags into, I would love to see, I would love to go back to where I went to middle school and say, hey, like, we have these opportunities. I got to send an email yesterday saying I have 25 slots that you can offer to sixth grade girls, inviting them to a women in STEM event or a girls in STEM event where they can explore from cybersecurity and engineering. And I've never gotten an email reply back so fast of, I would love to bring this in, or why haven't we heard about this? And I think that there's a disconnect between resources and educators, and then how the resources are sent out. So I would love to see a space where educators feel comfortable sharing these opportunities that target the minorities in a safe way.
That's awesome. In listening to both of you answer this question, I'm reminded of this flyer that came out for my oldest daughter at her elementary school, and it was STEM Club. And so I asked my daughter, I said, hey, are you interested in STEM Club? And she said, what is that? And so a part of me was like, how do you not know? They have this flyer out about this club. How are you not exposed enough to even know what this is, right? So, so Ms. Page, when you mentioned being exposed to the information first, really matters, right?
And that, and the exposure, I don't mean to cut you off, but the exposure,
No.
but then also like being okay with getting involved in STEM. Is there such a stigma of, oh my gosh, you're a STEM kid, or oh my gosh, you're involved in STEM? Like, STEM is the way of the future. We've seen AI, we've seen technology. Ms. Davis in quantum computing. Like, it's where we're going, and being okay to step into the space and not worry about what people are thinking. And I think that there's that barrier that we need to break down with the young kids, that like, this is the future and this is where you want to go. And you're ahead of the curve if you're involved in STEM club or TSA or a hack team or something, is it's only building you up and setting you up for success. And I think that that is what is most commonly missed.
Yes, I definitely have to agree with you on that point. And Ms. Dava, something you said about exposure as well in the collegiate area is in the field I'm in. I'm in Department of Defense Financial Management, and one of the things that the DoD has been doing aggressively is recruiting from a minority lens uh, uh, candidates to come work for the DoD, whether it's from an officer perspective or from a civilian perspective, putting recruiters in those historically Black universities and colleges to again get the exposure and bring back a diverse workforce where you have more thinking, more advancement, more, like you said, more changes in how technology is going to be used in the future. And so when you mentioned that, that reminded me of the lengths that some of the industries are going to have access to that talent pool. So so I would like to ask Ms. Davis, are you seeing that? Where you're seeing industries seek out individuals in the STEM field, and more specifically, young women, as a way to help fill those recruitment numbers and gain some good talent.
I am seeing that, and it's been really reassuring to see, especially as a young woman in the industry. But there are still a lot of issues, I think, that need to be worked on, as is the case with women's rights always, unfortunately. I hope one day we can just be like, oh yeah, women's rights, we're doing great on that. We don't need to talk about that anymore. Probably not going to happen, but there are some issues that are still prevalent within the recruiting models that we have. For example, I actually went to a conference this last week and came back last night. It's called the Grace Hopper Conference for Women in Technology. And the Grace Hopper Conference, Grace Hopper is this woman who created the first ever compiler, which is how all of our computers work today. And so this conference is for women and non-binary technologists. And the career fair was overrun by cisgender men who, on their name tags, had he, him. So about 40% of the attendees at the career fair were actually male. And you can find other people's experiences online with this as well, but they were running over women to trample them to get to recruiters. And they were shoving resumes in front of recruiters' faces.
Wow.
And my friend even had a conversation with a guy in line who said, I don't understand why these are women-only spaces. And so well, the efforts are being made. I think the tech industry still has a lot of work to do when it comes to allyship and creating safe places for women. And I think the Grace Hopper Conference, people are addressing those concerns now, making sure that never happens again. But I think that conference kind of showed me in a very personal way, because I was there, that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Thank you for that. So then this kind of segues perfectly into the next question I have for you. And that is, how can leaders in the STEM field make measurable actions to correct, or not correct, I would say connect more women and girls to science and technology fields? And what role do you see schools playing in bridging that gap? And we'll start with you, Ms. Page, since you are in the trenches right now in school, and could probably, tell us what's happening today in regards to that question.
Sure. I think that I probably come from a little bit of a different side. I go to a private Catholic high school, and I think that a lot of companies are hesitant to partner or to put their foot in anything that is religiously backed. So I think that at the end of the day, kind of taking that aside, I would love to see a space in the public schools where I know Alexandria right now is partnering with Virginia Tech, and IDA is also joining that fight, but creating a space that allows for girls and women to have an opportunity, but not just to have one opportunity, but to connect and then have multiple opportunities. And then as you grow through the school system, how are you being supported? Because one career fair, one exploration day is a start, but it's not. I had to do the work to continue those connections. I had to reach out and cold email and say, hey, like, I want to do this. I want to keep doing this. Not everybody is comfortable to do that. And I think that maybe, a path or a specific STEM path that gives you an idea of just how you need to go about it or where you need to go, and somebody to support you to roadmap your journey is something that I would love to see for students like myself, and then the generation that's upcoming, or the younger students that are upcoming.
Okay. And Ms. David, what would you say about that as far as the measurable actions that are being taken to, connect more women and girls to the field of science and technology?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of change in the last 10 years where it's growing as a trend almost, women in STEM, girl boss in STEM. And I think seeing those online communities form has been really cool, because I have a lot of friends that I've actually never met before who are some of my greatest friends in STEM, and they're all the way across the country, but they're doing cool things. And whenever I feel like, oh, like I've had this experience where I feel out of place as a woman in STEM, I can go to my online community and they're there to support me, and the same thing with them. And so seeing those online communities of sort of peers form has been really great to see. And then, as Miss Page said, mentorship is super important. Mentorship through corporations, mentorship through professionals in the field. And that goes back to my point on taking up space. When you see someone taking up space who looks like yours from a similar background as you, it's a really powerful thing. And I think the third thing goes back to the other question we answered, which is resources, and making sure those resources are actually accessible and equitable. Because I think a lot of nonprofit organizations who are working in the STEM space just sort of put those resources out there, not realizing that the voices that need them the most might not be able to see those resources because they don't have a LinkedIn account yet, because they don't think LinkedIn is, something they should use, or they don't have time to find those resources. And I think those three are the most important points with that.
And you know what? I think the other part too that people assume as well, in the greater, when you look at from a societal perspective, everyone even has, there's an assumption that everyone has access to the internet.
Yeah.
Which is not true. Right? You have children in a lot of communities that have to go to hotspots, right, to try to even do coursework, because where they live, they have no access to it. They have to go to the library. They have to, find ways. So even that's a real issue when you think about, if there's access to the resources, do they even have access to the to the to the resource, like you said, have access to the resource that allows them to know that that resource is even available, those courses, those classes, those clubs. I have to join Zoom, right, to engage in a conversation. How am I going to do that if I have no hotspot? I mean, even something as simple, and what we probably take for granted because we have access to it, as simple as even having access to the internet.
Exactly. And I think that unfortunately in STEM, because it's such a hard field and you kind of have to continuously go into it and not give up, there's a sort of incorrect assumption made about a lot of minorities in STEM, which is they should just try harder. And that's not true at all. And I think there's a lot of amazing steps being taken place to kind of dismantle that assumption, but it still holds true in a lot of majority spaces. And so I think anything we can do to sort of dismantle that assumption even more, which should not be our job, by the way, as women who are minorities. But as soon as that assumption sort of dismantles away, I think it would be a safer environment for women and girls as well.
So Miss Page, over to you. So are there any programs available for teachers, or are there resources out there for teachers that you've seen that was used that ultimately benefited the greater landscape of women and girls in STEM? Are those resources even out there for teachers to have access to?
So I think it's a two-part question. One, I wouldn't be where I am without the experimental, hey, we have this new resource. Hey, let's, give this a go and let's see where it is. But I think that a lot of it happened outside of the classroom, and a lot of that needs to change. Is you don't know what happens once you leave the classroom. And I think that I saw that firsthand. I took the same engineering course all 3 years. They just kept adding things on because I didn't want to take anything else. But I was maybe 2 of 32 girls, or 32 guys, 2 girls of 32 guys. And it was, you're in this space and you're trying these things out, and none of them are tailored towards girls or minorities in STEM. It was more of like a STEM exploration. So programs wise, for girls in STEM, girls in tech, girls that are interested in data science and research, Code with Clossy is a fantastic resource that I participated in this summer for the first time and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was both coding and researching. And then Girls Who Code, I've been a part of since I can't even count at this point, but they have amazing club opportunities ranging from 5th grade all the way through high school. I've moderated the same from 5th grade all the way through high school. I've continued it through. And then they also have their summer programs, they have fall programs, and the tutorials for teachers that are set up for it's inclusive to everybody. So it's how do you benefit girls in STEM for young men, but then also how do you, as a woman in STEM or as a girl in STEM, how are you successful through coding and your toolkit all the way through internship and interview prep. And so they've really helped support me. And then without teachers and without somebody being willing to try, I wouldn't, I mean, I wouldn't even know what STEM was.
So would you say then that the teachers that at least that have helped expose you to and help guide you through had the resources available themselves to even be able to adequately support you in your quest?
So yes and no. It comes down to, you know, when I first started, we didn't have any funding for anything. We were using the high school's resources. And even in a space where we have a whole CTE department, career and technical education department, there still wasn't enough money. There still weren't resources. And so as kind of we saw the increase of people that were interested grow, we were then able to have more opportunities. So I almost, you know, scholarship and being able to provide, I think, is a big part, but inside the classroom and in the classroom to help everybody at the same time in an equitable environment.
Okay. So Ms. Davis, so over to you, same thing, right? In your experience, were teachers and programs, were they equipped to effectively connect you to these opportunities that ultimately led you to, quantum computation and being an inventor and all the things that you're doing in the space?
So my answer would be no, because usually, because quantum computing is also such a niche space and it's so new, there were limited resources available for what I wanted to do. And then I also came from sort of a low resource background in high school. And so there definitely weren't enough resources for even normal computing, let alone quantum computing. And so what I realized through that was oftentimes teachers had the best intentions in mind and wanted to help and wanted to do everything they can, but we're stretched really thin always. And so they didn't have time to go out and find resources either. And so I kind of had to do it on my own and go out of my way to search things. And I was lucky enough to have the time to be able to do that because I didn't have to support my family. And so I realized that for me, the most important thing after I found those resources was to give it back to everyone else who didn't have the time to find them. And that's kind of how my journey as an activist and an advocate started for women in STEM, was because I think it also makes you feel less like an imposter when you're in STEM, when you're giving back to people and you're talking about your experiences, kind of like this panel. And so that's been my experience with it. But there are a lot of cool programs now that exist that I don't think existed when I was sort of starting to go into it, including the ones that Miss Page mentioned, which I think are amazing. And then also rewriting the code is an amazing one. I learned about rewriting the code when I was actually on a panel with Kristen Austin, who's a big part of that. And we were at a panel at Harvard and I was super nervous for my speech and she hyped me up before that, and she's amazing. So if you ever get the chance to talk to Kristen, please do that. And then the other one is definitely Qubit by Qubit for quantum computing. It's called the Coding School, and they actually have beginner level quantum computing courses worldwide for students. And so you can learn quantum computing while at home remotely. And then the third one that I do recommend is a lot of universities have high school and middle school women in STEM programs. So if you go to your local university, try to find those, because that way you can be on campus, meet professors and stuff like that. And then at the university level, I don't think professors really kind of hone in on the fact that there's opportunities out there, because they also have just been like professors for 30-40 years. And so if you're at a university and you're a woman in STEM and you feel unsupported, go and look out for those student organizations and those events having on campus, because you won't hear about those in class probably.
So when you started the initiative to create a student group, how was that received? Was there support? Did it take a lot of legwork? What was that experience like?
Yeah. And so for me, there was a lot of support. I think NC State, where I go, is a really amazing community where if you say that you want to shoot for the stars, they'll be like, oh yeah, for sure, we'll help you go all the way to another galaxy. And I think most communities that are STEM oriented really do have the resources if you put your voice out there, to, especially at a university level. Your department definitely has enough money to support your dreams in terms of creating programs that help you. They sometimes do need a little push from students. And so what I did was I was grateful enough to have a lot of support for Quantum Computing Club and Women in Electrical and Computer Engineering and Society of Women Engineers, which are the 3 organizations that I'm heavily involved in. But for Quantum Computing Club, they really wanted to see interest, and they wanted to see, oh, like if we fund this, are there people that would join your club? And so there actually wasn't at the time. And so there were only 4 of my friends that I recruited, and I was like, just come to this meeting for me. And so they came to our first interest meeting. And then that was a year ago now. And this year I'm teaching a quantum workshop series, and we have 250 plus registrants. So it was a drastic change from when I was sort of begging people to come to Quantum Computing Club. And those 250 plus residents or 250 plus students go from the freshman year of college all the way to PhD level. And so, yeah, I get to be a little instructor every Friday and do that, but we still need to work on that. My hope is next year, those participants are even more diverse, because right now we do have a mostly male class. And so we're going to reach out to more women, let them know quantum computing is for them, and make sure that we continue to improve upon our programming every single year.
That is amazing. Thank you for that. So switching gears here, because of course, when we discuss the influence of a leader, right, we cannot have this discussion without acknowledging how age, race, gender, help drive the effectiveness of the influence, right? So what are some practical ways that you navigate these differences when you are leading in your respective areas? And Ms. Page, we'll ask you to answer that first.
Sure. I think probably for me at least is being comfortable with being the youngest in the space, and not just by like 5 years, but by like 10 or 15 years. Um, when I met Mrs. Roberts, I was probably the youngest one at the UNA conference by 6 or 7 years. And I got thrown into that by a history teacher that was like, hey, this looks cool. I'll pay for you to go if you want to go. And I was supposed to have somebody with me, and she ended up, not being able to make it. And I, looked over the balcony. I was like, all right, here we go. So I think just being comfortable being the youngest, and then going, either finding somebody that has a common interest with you or somebody that you're comfortable networking with. And for me, that was Mrs. Roberts. She gave it was a fantastic, I still to this day, I use your speech or your workshop as an example of, hey, this is what I want to see. This is what we need to see. But finding somebody that you can start with, finding a starting point, and then going through and saying, where else can I look for somebody that maybe can help me or can support me in this way? And then inviting those people to events literally with what you do. So they can see how you give it back, that you're not just somebody having a conversation for the heck of having a conversation. Like not everybody, I can, hi, I'm 17. I also do all sorts of digital literacy work. Like, okay, but what does that look like? And I think a big part of what I do is making sure that people see what it looks like. So whether it's putting it on LinkedIn, if I've met you twice and I would like to reach out to you in a couple weeks, or, meeting you in person and saying, hey, you live close enough, come over, come join us for breaking down the Steam door, come join us for Hack BI, and like just different things, so that I'm not I'm not just a face that says that I do things, but also like, how is it implemented? How are we literally helping those minorities and girls in STEM in our community? So yeah.
You said something that I don't think you intended to say it this way, but this is how I interpreted it. You opened your mouth. I don't know if people realize the magnitude of that, of just making people aware of what you desire to do, what you're doing, within your own control to get at it. And then those people were drawn to, like that teacher who said, "Hey," because that person heard you mention, may have said in conversation the things you were doing, and then saw something that said, "I think this might be cool for her to do." How amazing is that? I love that.
And I think that being right and being comfortable with sharing what you've done, and it's not in a way of like, oh, I've done X, Y, and Z, but in a way of, this is what I've done. Can you support me? And the biggest conversation I've had is, I was at a youth leadership conference within Alexandria City, and they have a bunch of people from different city departments. And I walked up to one of our councilwomen, and Aaliyah Gaskins has been probably my biggest supporter. She's a neighbor, just on all levels has been able to support me. And I said, "Do you need an intern?" And she goes, "Well, I've never had an intern." I said, "Well, can we make it work? Like, let's figure something out." And so I wouldn't be in the advocacy space without that conversation, but I think it's the little like questions or the direct questions, and just being comfortable with also being uncomfortable is probably one of my other biggest things.
I was going to ask you how you landed, and not by happenstance either, but was it your your internship? Was it just that I want to intern for you, and that person said, I've never had an intern? And was it just that conversation?
It was quite literally. So I went, everybody in Alexandria City were pretty tight, and I have an uncle who's a cop and is friends with whoever and whatever. So I was like, you know what, let me go find somebody who doesn't have a general idea of it. So I walked up to her and I was like, "Do you need an intern? You're a city councilwoman. I've been interested in government for a while. I've been interested in helping people and not only taking my STEM, but how can we then, move STEM?" And she goes, "Oh, well, I work with ARHA, which is our housing inclusion efforts in Alexandria Housing Commission." And she goes, "Oh, I'd love to implement STEM workshops in these housing communities and at our rec centers. And we're giving out Wi-Fi. And if you want to, meet the students and be a part of that." And that's when I really saw like everything that I was able to do. And currently in high school right now, it's a little bit different because we're in a different, it's not a public school setting, but looking back, it's like, oh, I can then go and share everything that I've been able to do, or I can help it was more of just one conversation has led to just a domino effect of where I am right now.
And so that internship allowed you to expand your advocacy work in a tremendous way, it sounds like.
It went from city council, a year and a half in city council, doing my homework in the back of public hearings and meetings, and after school, you bring I was bringing a little suit and blazer, and I'd hang it in the back of my history classroom. And then I'd go to practice to, clean up real quickly, and then I'd run down to city council, to the UNA conference. And then without that, that has opened a whole new set of doors. And I've met some of the greatest people that have continued to support me. And I'm still amazed how Mrs. Roberts reaches out to me and I have all these opportunities. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So literally one thing has just led to so much more. And I had no expectations going in. And I think that was the biggest thing, is that she had never had an intern. I had never been an intern. And there was no clear path. So it was, oh, you're interested in let's figure it out. And it's no expectations is always like where I think you receive the most.
Right. And there were no limitations that you were bound to either in that
Absolutely.
Experience. That's awesome. And so, Ms. Dava, I'm going to toss this question over to you. Again, if we're going to discuss leadership, how do we acknowledge how age, race, gender is a driver in the effectiveness of the influence as we again continue to navigate some practical ways in how we navigate the differences when you are leading in those respective areas.
For sure. And I really like Miss Page's answer because I had a similar story actually, where my journey with advocacy started because I interned with a city councilwoman when I was in high school and middle school. And so I think the first point for my answer will be to find those role models that inspire you, and in relation to that, to make sure that you're not counting yourself out of any opportunity, and instead you're making opportunities for yourself, is something that I've learned as a leader, because I'm very introverted at times, as I think a lot of STEM people are. And so sometimes, especially as women and girls, we count ourselves out of opportunities. We're like, oh, I'm not going to go up to this person and, ask them for this because they're such a big person. Like, I can't do that. But oftentimes, when you ask, the worst thing that can happen is a no. And that's okay. You just have to ask someone else. If a door is closing, you're knocking on the wrong door. And so I think having those role models and not being able to afraid to ask for things are two things that I've learned as a leader. And then going back to identity, oftentimes I think because of my identity, I am underestimated and seen almost as less than, especially because I'm a woman in a lot of men's spaces, especially in tech, in my department, and also as a woman of color in all of these spaces. And then also I'm the youngest in a lot of the spaces that I'm in, especially with leadership and speaking and even advocacy at times. And so one thing that I realized after a lot of self-reflection and after being in these spaces for a couple of years was that my identity was not a disadvantage, even though it seemed like it was my superpower. And what happened is I did a lot of self-reflection and I became very aware of who I am, what I want to do in the world, what my why is, and a lot of internal work on that. And so now I still have those external instances where people second guess me, or men in my classes, try to one up themselves and tell me that I'm wrong and stuff like that. But because of that sort of internal confidence that I was almost like forced to get because of those experiences, I know who I am. I can stand my ground and I can be like, actually, no, that's not correct. And that's happened actually quite a lot in the quantum workshop series that I told you about that I'm doing in my school. There's a lot of men that are older than me that are taking the workshop series, and even though I'm the instructor and I'm the one who set up the course, and also I've taught over 10,000 plus students quantum computing and worked out as a quantum engineer, and have done like crazy things, like grateful enough to be recognized on a Times Square billboard for me being able to teach quantum. There's men in my classes that raise their hand and try to one up me with their questions or try to tell me that I'm wrong. And it's crazy because they know I went over my background the first day of class. Like, I'm the reason they're taking this class.
Right.
So if they want to, and if they don't think I'm equipped as an instructor, they can leave. But instead, they just try to raise their hand and one up me. And I think that's insane. 3 years ago, I would have cried on the spot and not been able to answer their question and admitted that they're right and I was wrong, just like second guessing myself. Now I know who I am. I know what I know. I know why I'm doing this, and I'm going to stand my ground. And so I do recommend to anyone who is a minority in the spaces they're in to kind of make sure to focus on your internal well-being and confidence and mental health as well, because that's going to propel you externally, which I wish I would have done much sooner.
That was amazing. I congratulate both of you on the work you're doing, because both of you have said that the internal is what you look inward to yourself to say, okay, why am I doing this? What is it for? Who am I trying to serve? Once you realize that, the outside noise becomes less and less and less. I love it. So as we continue to talk about, okay, how do we continue to gain influence in these areas? Are there specific ways where you have found common ground, where it was you had the ability to invite allyship? You know what I mean? And I think you even mentioned that earlier, so can you expound on what that looks like when we use the term allyship?
Yeah, for sure. I think allyship to me is supporting women and also making sure that you're not grabbing opportunities that are for them. And I think allyship, one example that I can give, and I think it's the best example of allyship I've seen in my life, is so for women in electrical and computer engineering, one of our officers is actually male, and he's, you know, a cisgender male, and his name is Ben, and he's amazing. And we didn't have a treasurer our first year when we started because there weren't even enough women in electrical and computer engineering almost to fill up all of our officer positions. So he was like, "Oh yeah, I can be treasurer." And when he said that, I assumed he would, you know, do it for the year and then we'll find someone else. And then, you know, I'd be like, you're set to go because he has a lot on his plate.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, I've seen him become such a great ally, and he's still treasurer for our club. His name is Ben Patton. He goes to NC State University, one of the best people I've met. He makes sure that he, you know, relays any opportunities he finds to the club, and to now we have over 600 plus women in our club. You know, sending those opportunities, making sure he like does the work that he needs in his role, making sure that he learns more about allyship. And so even though he didn't know a lot about allyship in the beginning, he, you know, went out of his way to be like, oh, how can I make women feel comfortable in these spaces? How can I, you know, make sure that I change my behavior to make sure that I'm supporting women in STEM? Because sometimes it can be small little things that kind of turn off women in the STEM pipeline, when, you know, someone talks down to you in class, or when a professor underestimates your ability. And so he has put in that work to be a good ally and disseminate that information. And also, he's not taken away any opportunities for women in the club. He, like, for example, it was so cool. We have a company night where we have 23 plus companies come on our campus to recruit women in ECE. And I told him, I was like, hey, you do so much work for the club. Like, feel free to come to this event. Like, you know, we can tell the companies, like, yeah, this is Ben. He does everything for our club. And he was like, no, I'm going to help set up. And there are other career fairs for me where men are the majority, like you guys do. So he had helped set up, but he didn't go to the event, you know, which I think speaks a lot to his own character, and definitely wasn't needed to be done as an ally, but I think it represents how allyship is done.
So Ms. Page, over to you. And although you're in high school, I get a sense that your exposure required some allyship, right? Because the connections you've made weren't just done in a bubble. So can you expound on how you've been able to seek those allies, and how those allies have assisted you in getting to where you are now, and how they're helping you get to where you want in the future?
Absolutely. So, my school environment is not, you don't see a lot of change makers. You don't see a lot of push for equity, diversity and inclusion, etc. So a lot of people don't even know what I do when I bring my little suit in with me. And so a lot of that is finding, it's been able to, you know, starting with Aaliyah and networking with one person, and then keeping that relationship and keeping a lasting relationship with somebody. Whether it's touching base, for example, Tarika Barrett is the CEO of Girls Who Code. I had the opportunity to meet her at Code Fair. And then through meeting with her, she's like, oh yeah, send me an email update of what you're doing. So once a month, I have a phone reminder where I send a little update of, hey, this is what I've been doing this month. This is what I've been, because you never know. And so I think a lot of it is creating allies with, or even talking to people that you wouldn't even, you know, in a million years think that you'd be able to talk to or go up and introduce yourself to. And then creating a lasting relationship to form an ally, or to form somebody that's willing to support you. And then they know people. Everybody that's in the STEM space, it seems, for some reason, it's seeming to get smaller and smaller. Everybody knows everybody somehow, and everybody's interconnected. So the one relationship or the one person that you ask probably knows somebody that in 3 years you know would like to meet. And I think that's probably the gist of it, is just making sure that you have a lasting relationship, and then from there doing what you can to maintain it, and then helping support others maintain their relationships with people to support them.
I love that. I think the other thing I heard you say too was refer her, right? Because that person, that CEO is saying every month, send me a reminder of what you're doing, because if there's an opportunity, she's going to refer you.
Right.
And I think that helps to push the allyship discussion, is being willing to give someone an opportunity that they're suited for. And that, again, like you said, now you've built another relationship, you made another connection. That person might introduce you to someone else, and it's that connected chain of relationships is what helps build allyship. I love that. So, Miss Page, I'm gonna throw this question at you first. If there's one piece of advice you want to leave us with on how we can invest in girls' rights, leadership, and well-being, what would that be?
Oh man. Um, one piece of advice. Um, I think probably to continue, advocating and to continue working, and that there is so much more to be done. So any small act that is
Mm.
done is creating and leading to bigger change. And I think that it's often, the smaller things are overshadowed by the big things, but remembering that even if, you have the smallest STEM event or the smallest whatever it is, it's still leading to something bigger. So anything small always leads to something greater.
Okay, thank you. And Miss Deva, over to you. The same question. What's that one small piece of advice you want to leave us with on how we can invest in girls' rights, leadership, and well-being?
Yeah, I think make sure to have the women in a room, like, so if you're in a women sorry, if you're in a room with women, make sure that you're doing everything you can to be an ally. Ask them about their dreams, ask them about their goals, ask them about what they need from you as a woman in STEM, or if you're, a male in STEM or anything, just ask them like what they need and how you can help, and make sure to connect them to those opportunities. Like Miss Page mentioned, one little interaction or one little thing can sort of catapult you into your dreams and into your life. And so I think if every single person asks the girls they find in a room, hey, what are your dreams, how can I help, let me connect you, the world would immediately be a better place, and we would find a lot of more girls in leadership.
Oh, this has been a very rich discussion that has, I have to admit, opened my eyes to the phenomenal work that is occurring in both of your communities. It's exposing young girls and women to the spaces that will allow them to flourish in leadership roles, and it affords them uh, to get to a place where they have an improved well-being, right? Because now you're able to be in spaces that allows you to gain the work experience, that allows you to gain the money needed to live, and all that great stuff that goes along with, and then also, like you said, give back to the community, which is what you both have been pounding in this discussion, is looking for ways to give back. So that's been awesome. And I think the other part that I enjoyed was what it takes for us to do this is the investment. What it takes is the partnership. What it takes is the allyship of those with influence um, to keep the work going, right? That you described today. In order for it to continue, we got to do that. And then, also I want to thank both of you for the work that you're doing in the trenches to elevate and advocate for girls and young women. And this concludes our discussion. And if you're interested in partnering with Global Freedom Group, look for us on LinkedIn or on our website at globalfreedom.group. And I want to tell you both have a great day. And that's it. Now, as